Hi, everyone. Welcome to our One World Energy Encounter with the Zohar. This week's portion is Kitavo. There's no specific Zohar for this week's portion, so we are in our volume 1, the prologue to the Zohar, and we're at verse 247. In my book, it's page 142, but it's verse 247, and it's the 14th precept, which is called to observe the Shabbat. Let's invite in our teachers, our teachers' teachers, inviting in the Rav and Karen and Michael, Rav Ashlag, Rav Brandwein, Divrei Kodesh, Ramchal, Rabbi Tarfon, Rav Mezulai, Rav Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, Rav Kolonmus, Shapira Piasetzin, the Baal Shem Tov, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, and all the students, Rav Mordechai Chernobyl, One Soul with Yosef Atzadik, Joseph the Righteous in Shechem, and a quick comment about inviting in. Oh, also today is the 15th of Elul, of Virgo, so it's full moon, blue moon too. It's full moon, and so we are receiving the full impact of Elul, of Virgo, whatever that is. Now, unfortunately, shortly the energy of Shabbat is going to find its way into our cosmos and kind of ease us into Shabbat. So that will counterbalance any challenging aspects of Virgo. Today's also the anniversary of elevation of Rav Yaakov Kapel Chassid, a student of the Baal Shem Tov, and also Rav David Lasker, the Mulei Igagi, brother of Rav Shlomo ben Lachant.
David, okay. May I just quickly say, because it's perfectly timed because it's a full moon today, Michael Berg, everybody, for those that heard the lecture only a few weeks ago, said, guys, consciously, every time when the moon is full, we should be imagining that it stays full, that it doesn't wane from this point forward.
Okay, great. And literally it does. The only thing that changes is our perspective. The other thing I thought you were going to go in this direction is on the 15th, all the tzaddikim are available to us today. Okay, as we connect to these verses, where from wherever we are sending energy of ahavat chinam, unconditional love to the world, of treating everyone with human decency. We're sending out healing energy to all those we know who need healing, and energy of elevation to those souls that we know who are transitioning, Chaim Meir ben Alter Avram. And also, we want to remove all the negativity from our realm, all the chaos, protection from evil eye and evil speech. Okay, verse 247. Pikuda arbesar lenatra yoma de Shabbata, diu yoma de nahacha mi kol ovade bereshit, harak lilan terrain pikudin, chad netorav de yoma Shabbat, v'chad lekashra hahu yoma beki dushe, lenatra yoma de Shabbata, kama da'ad karna vit arna alayhu, diu yoma de nahacha la'almin, v'chol avidan be ish Tach Lilu, Ve'it Avidu al di Kadash Yoma. Ron?
The 14th precept is to be observed. The 14th precept is to observe the Shabbat, which is the day of rest from all the acts of creation.
Okay, so traditionally, when people are taught about the Sabbath, it's basically just like, in traditional circles, it's just a list of restrictions. They're all different kinds of restrictions that apply to this 25-hour period. And for some, it doesn't really end there. It's just, some people just, observing the Shabbat is about observing the restrictions. But observe is a funny word, no? And let's just go with the English of observe. What does it mean to observe? And usually observe means to watch, to take a look, to take a step back. So what is it about Shabbat? There are restrictions, but Shabbat isn't about restrictions. If you identify Shabbat with restrictions, then you're missing the point. The restrictions are a means towards an end. The restrictions, whatever they are, whatever it is that we accept upon ourselves, are there to assist us in maximizing our connection, in maximizing our consciousness around Shabbat. Isn't that what observation is? Isn't that an aspect of consciousness? So the question is, what is that consciousness? And what is the purpose of the restrictions? Like, what is it that we're about to enter it? And as we've been taught, the energy of Shabbat actually begins to infuse our realm right after midday today. So already it's like we don't accept, there are actually some restrictions people accept upon themselves after midday on Friday. I'm just looking up locally what time is midday. It's 12:50. So we'll be on the call when that happens. It's a mere 24 minutes from now. The energy of Shabbat starts to infuse our realm, our physical realm. So like, what does even that mean? The energy of Shabbat. So I think part of what we need to wrap our heads around is this idea that while in the upper realm, the energy is equal throughout, in our realm, there are certain pockets of energy that are bound by region and bound by time and bound by space. I heard David Guion give an excellent explanation of this using the analogy of sitting courtside at a basketball game. He's like, I wouldn't pay the money, but I once got invited to sit courtside to a Lakers game. And whatever price it was, like 2 rows behind, it was like, 10% of the price for the courtside. It was only a few feet. What's the difference? So he went back there and he sat there and he's like, oh my God, when you're there, you don't even want to be there. You want to be back in the front row. What is it? It's energy. It's a different energy. Well, what is that energy around? That energy is around those 10 players running around the court. I'm just saying, like, it's 10 players. It's 10 players running around that court. Well, who are they? Well, these are 10 elite athletes who have been able to accept upon themselves serious restrictions. What kind of restrictions? Like workout nuts. Like they're working out 24/7. And they ascend to this elite status of being like the best athletes within this sport, but perhaps in the world. Like, so when you're sitting near them, you are basking in the energy of their restriction. It's the restrictions that assist us in manifesting life in this realm. So carrying that analogy forward to Shabbat, it's the restrictions that we accept upon ourselves that enable us to manifest light during the one day a week when it's most conducive to manifesting light, manifesting energy of healing, manifesting energy of fulfillment, manifesting energy of protection, manifesting energy of soulmates, all those things that are in the upper realm. It's easier to connect to them on Shabbat. So what are we observing? We're observing that this is a different realm that we enter into when it comes to Shabbat. And so for the first benefit we get is a greater appreciation for what goes on in our world and where energy, what kind of energy is available and when and where. Like Guillaume also said, he's like, look, Jerusalem is the energy center of the world. It's unlike any other place. Yes, Roshan. Unmute.
So that to me raises a lot of questions. I mean, in a general way about
Awesome.
how Shabbat is determined to happen. Like from one calendar to another. And I'm referring to like the Hebrew calendar, the Christian calendar. There was a change from Saturday Shabbat to Sunday Shabbat. And you wonder, like, what is the authority that informs that? How do we access that really? That's my question.
Well, so interestingly, what kind of energy do you think is dominant on Sunday? It's chesed. It's the energy of mercy. So I don't know what the Romans did to determine that it should be on Sunday. I'm just not privy to that. But that was this conscious decision that they made. But
If I can jump in, historically, they say, and again, I'm quoting others, historically, they say that it was literally changed so that it was distinguished from what I'm gonna call the Jewish Shabbat, right? So they were just trying to make it separate, so it may not have an energetic reasoning behind it.
And it might.
And it might,
It's a different energy.
yes, I wasn't creating
So,
controversy.
so like
just-
we don't know. You're right. We don't know. My understanding is that's where the line comes from. When in Rome, do like the Romans, because the original followers were in what is present day Israel and went to Rome, and they saw that they observed their Sabbath on Sunday. When in Rome, do like the Romans.
It's like good old prejudice.
Yeah. So like, but for us, as members of the tribes of children of Israel, of the descendants of Jacob, of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, look, it's right there in the Old Testament. This is the Shabbat.
Yeah. Well, if I may, by the way, the
This
other
is
thing
the seventh day. Yes.
it changed. I believe the physical change occurred in the 2nd or 3rd century. So actually, it wasn't an immediate thing at the time. So again, interesting. What was the real cause of their making that change?
Right. But for us, it's really more about, and it's a great question, Roshan, but it's a little bit beyond the scope, because for us, it's like, well, what do I do to maximize my connection to the Shabbat, to the window in time that's available? Okay, Ron, keep going.
Okay, there are 2 precepts included here. One is to observe the day of the Shabbat, and one is to attach this day to its holiness.
Okay, so one is observing. And again, like I grew up with the idea of observing meant keeping the restrictions. I didn't have an understanding as to what the purpose of the restrictions were, other than this is what you're supposed to do. But for us, restrictions, that's the only way we can manifest light in this world. Because essentially a restriction is something you're doing that goes against your nature. And again, to use the basketball analogy, if you make a decision that every day you're going to take 100 shots at the basket, you're going to develop a better shot. You're going to become a better basketball player. That's a restriction that you're accepting upon yourself. And that's what elite athletes do. They accept all kinds of restrictions upon themselves to excel in that particular sport. And it's the restrictions that lead to that light energy that they are manifesting. Again, when it comes to Shabbat, it's the restrictions that give us the opportunity to tap into that energy that's available to us. Unlike the other 6 days of the week, where there's a balance between desire to receive for the self and desire to receive for the sake of sharing, the other side, the Satan, our desire to receive for the self, has the upper hand during the 6 days of the week. So we have to work harder. We have to restrict more to manifest that light, to go against our nature. It's a much greater battle. On Shabbat, the playing field is tipped in favor of the light. The Satan, the other side, our desire to receive of the self, is at a disadvantage on Shabbat. So that is part of what goes into the special opportunity we have. So the first thing the first precept that Zohar points out is to kind of observe, this is a unique energy. What are we going to do about it? And the second one is to attach the state to its holiness. And what does Rav Ashlag, keep going, what does Rav Ashlag explain that to be, Ron?
Namely, to draw down the mochin of Chokhmah that is called holiness.
Okay, so what is holiness? I remember our teachers explaining it. I remember hearing the Rav explain it. It's not whole, H-O-L-E. It's whole, W-H-O-L-E. Which is an interesting play on words. And what does that mean? We are joining the upper realm with the lower realm. we're mochin, look at mochin as these like kind of parcels of energy that are circulating up in the upper realm, that we are manifesting in our world from a level of chokhmah, which is the second sphira of the 10 sphirot of the tree of life. So it's a very high connection that we have on Shabbat. And so when we talk about holiness, again, like I grew up with this idea, maybe we all did, like, what is holiness? Well, it's special. Yes, it is special. But what is it beyond being special? What exactly is it? What does it mean to be holy? If it's just special, then why don't we just call it special? But holy is a whole different thing.
Hey, David.
Yes.
So going back to your statement and question. So going back to your comment about the word observance. So if on the Sabbath, the energy is different, right? And the energy's there. Are we getting more energy then if we understand the consciousness? So when this says talking about bringing down the, this energy of Mokhin, right? From Hokama, are we getting more because we're aware and we are consciously thinking about drawing that energy?
Yes. Hence the observe part. Like if you're not consciously observing it, we're not maximizing it. I mean, we maximize opportunities with consciousness. I mean, as a newbie to Kabbalah, when I was exposed to that idea, I was like, what? Because it's above logic. I thought it's all about logic. I thought it's all about intellect. It's not, it's about consciousness. It's different. It's like a distinction between knowing information and having wisdom in terms of how you apply it. And that trigger for us is our consciousness. Yes, Peter.
I wanted to, because I looked up and I went to a couple of different sites, including a Christian site. And I think this is really nice because whatever, no judgment. What apparently happened is they made a decision not to observe the Sabbath. They didn't move the Sabbath, and Sunday became the Lord's Day. So if you follow the distinction, they didn't change the Sabbath.
Right. I think they still do call it the Sabbath in some circles. So I don't know. And then there are the Seventh-day Adventists, which literally they're observing it on the seventh day. My first exposure to them was when I took the SAT on Sunday, and I was sitting in a room with other Seventh-day Adventists. It was pretty interesting. Up until that point, I didn't know that. Anyhow, so part of what's available to us is this extra light and this holiness. It's a unique window in time. And then additionally, we have these restrictions, we have this observation, and we also have, as the Zohar explains it, we're attaching this day to its holiness. The holiness is there. How do we attach it? With our consciousness. Literally. Okay, keep going.
Okay. So to observe the day of the Shabbat is, as I have mentioned and explained, is to keep it as a day of rest to all the worlds.
So it's funny because also traditionally it's been explained to as a day of rest, where the Creator ceased creation. And if you read the creation story in the Old Testament, in the 5 books of Moses, the Bible, 6 days the Creator created the world, and the 7th day he rested. How do you reconcile that with this idea that creation is happening at every moment of existence? You mean there's nothing going on creatively on Shabbat? Like the Creator hit the pause button? Because the Creator hit the pause button, not much light's going to end up here. It seems completely contradicting to this idea that we are attaching our world to the upper world, our world of the mundane, our world that has no light of its own. We're attaching it to the upper realm where all the light comes from, the source. And haven't we learned that part of what we're doing is we're completing the work of creation in the work that we do? That after Mount Sinai, and we've studied the Zohar on this, after Mount Sinai, we took the place of the angels to finish creating the world. So what does it really mean to rest? And, it says in the first line here, which is a day of rest from all the acts of creation. So what does that mean, a day of rest? Yes, Roshan, help me out with this.
Doesn't it sort of assume, if you just put it in the literal sense like that, like, okay, God's resting, right? Which is what you hear like in first grade or something. And
Yes, exactly.
Right. And most people just carry on thinking that way, I think, who observe any kind of practice. But doesn't that sort of assume that we understand God's consciousness? I think we can receive something from God's consciousness. I think we call it the light. But do we really understand what that means? I thought the three upper worlds were beyond our understanding.
Yeah, well, clearly it's much more difficult. Certainly Keter is a very difficult thing for us to understand. And beyond Keter, we have no understanding. It's the limits of our conscious understanding when we are in physicality. So yeah, but it's there. It's right here in writing. It's there in the Bible. Like, what does it mean to rest on the Shabbat? So one way of looking at this is we are resting from our mundane consciousness. Like here we are the rest of the week. My job's important, paying my bills is important, answering my phone is important. All these things are important. That's what you got to do to navigate the real world. On Shabbat, we restrict from that. So it's not so much rest, although a nap's always a good idea. It's not so much rest, because for many, Shabbat is like all these restrictions are creating all this energy. So again, it's what the consciousness of around that term rest means. So there wasn't any active creation, but the energy is so constantly flowing, even on Shabbat, more so on Shabbat, from the upper realm. So it's like a resting from physicality and connecting to spirituality. And, that's an important part of our consciousness to, again, maximize the opportunity that the window in time presents to us.
David, and I
Yes.
read in the last sentence, and you said it, and then it's interesting because I'm thinking about a couple of the other Zohars this week, and even a TLE I listened to. The act of creation is in everything all the time. And this next sentence says that all the acts were already performed, right? So Nancy, actually it was yesterday, right? Nancy asked, well, then why do we have free will, right? Right? There are, and they explain, right, there's really two parallel worlds going on at the same time, but everything is there and it's our job to truly manifest it. That's why we're here.
Right. On the topic of free will, I just want to address a point that I've been thinking about, and that is, if I make a mistake, was it me that made the mistake? One of the things we've learned is no, that was an important part of your process. Not only that, the Creator led you to make that mistake. So then where's my free will? My free will is how I'm going to look at that. My free will is my consciousness. How am I going to view events in my life? I need to look at them all as opportunities for growth. Not as opposed to opportunities to like beat myself up. Yes.
I think that what you're saying is true. And I also think that the caveat is about the words that you use. Mistake it's never the word. It's a choice. You make one choice and you learn from it, and you make a different choice and you learn from that. But when you say mistake, you're judging it, and therefore you're judging the Creator.
Yeah, that's very, listen, the words we choose is very important. Absolutely. I was wondering where you were, Hannah. It just says Zoom user.
Yeah, sadly, I had to drive somewhere. So
okay, it's okay. That's okay. Thank you for that. That's helpful. Roshan, did you have your hand up? Oh no, Ron, you had your hand up. Ron?
Yeah, actually, I was gonna say like I feel like we do quite a bit of work on Shabbat.
Right, and it's a busy time, isn't it?
It's a busy time
It
receiving all
is. It is,
message.
but it's busy in a different way.
Mhm.
It's busy in a way that's different from the rest of the week. This is why, people decide to wear different clothes. I mean, they're doing things physically, so it's easier for them to connect to the energy and make that distinction from the rest of the week. One of the things, and there's Zohars on, we have special food on Shabbat night and Shabbat lunch, things we don't necessarily eat during the rest of the week. Really, the food too? Why the food? Well, in certain degree, it creates more of a festive atmosphere, perhaps. But another level, what is food? It's a delivery system, not just for salt. It's delivering energy. It's delivering energy. And the food for Shabbat is delivering extra energy. Not only that, but as we've studied, and as we can see in our connection books, we get extra doses of soul on Shabbat. Why do we have extra doses of soul? What does even that mean? We have a greater capacity to channel more light through our restriction on Shabbat. Our soul, extra doses of soul, is our expansion of our vessel. And so we move from, in my analogy, from an 8-ounce cup to a 12-ounce cup. We can accommodate more light.
So go through that a little more, right? So you're talking about when we always say everybody says it a little differently. We both on Friday night and then in Shachrit, we're connecting to the aspects of the soul, the first three aspects.
Yes.
But I thought that's what you're saying. So expound on that, because they say that, okay, and you just said it, we're expanding our vessel, but it's only for the week, right? It's not that it's going beyond that. So
it's only for Shabbat. It's literally for Shabbat. We get an expanded vessel on Shabbat.
It happens on Shabbat.
Yes.
But the point is, they say
we lose it when Shabbat ends. We return. Yeah, we do. And
so what is it? So if we're expanding only on Shabbat,
we have an expanded vessel on Shabbat.
And so we're getting more light, then I guess the question would be, what is it? Well, wait, what is it that we're supposed to do with it? If you're saying that vessel,
what's the point of that? The point is the light, not so much the vessel. The vessel is important, but the point is the amount of light that we reveal, and that's assisting us in removing chaos for the week to come. It's like we're planting seeds for the week to come. I want a week without chaos. And so the more light I reveal in Shabbat, the more light I have for that week to come. It's like it's our time for kind of recharging our soul, recharging our connection to our soul. One of the teachings about the reason why when we transition from Shabbat back to weekday on Saturday night, we say Havdalah, which literally means to make a distinction between, and the prayer itself is all about making that distinction, acknowledging the distinctions between what goes on in Shabbat and what goes on during the week. And one of the reasons why we smell the spices is because it's a higher spiritual connection we make from the nose, and we're trying to revive our soul from the loss of capacity when we lose that extra soul. It's one of the consciousnesses around the psamim, the spices that we smell during Havdalah. Yes, Suzanne.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody, you, Hannah, everybody, for just the awareness. This is really powerful. I just want to add one more thing too. I happened to be on a New York thread that had some commentary from Michael Berg, and he was saying that it's a really important week to really clear and build the vessel for Shabbat, like to really, it's just really kind of cool how it's like a threaded experience, like a process to constantly keep going deeper, because you want to prepare that vessel to hold as much light. But like you're saying, we're surrounded by it, and then we get as much as we can through the work, right? And then we start
Yes.
over again type thing. So
Yes.
just wanted to share that because I thought it
Yeah,
was
no,
all
that's
so
that's
profound.
great. I mean, think about we're it's circular. We do our 6 days, we're back at Shabbat again, 6 days back at Shabbat. But it's like circular, but we want to be circular and we want to be elevating from each experience on that circular. So it's both, looking at it from a linear perspective, it's circular, but it's also ascending. I guess that's the thread when I think of the thread. But that's a great point, Suzanne. Thank you for sharing that. Let's try and take one more. 240. Oh, wait, did you read the last line, Ron, of 247?
No.
Okay.
No. And all actions are within that day and were already performed even before that day was sanctified.
So it's manifestation. Shabbat is manifestation. It's because it's malchut. So if the first day, Sunday, is mercy, chesed, Sunday chesed, Monday gevura. That's why I always assume Sunday night is difficult. It's the energy of gevura. I assume because I was going to school the next day as a kid. Because, your logical mind is trying to make sense out of why Sunday nights are so difficult. It's the energy of gevura. Chesed gevur tiferet, netzach hod yesod, and the seventh day is malchut. What's malchut? Is manifestation. So we're trying to manifest all this energy from potential, from the upper realm. And so I once asked one of my teachers, I'm sure I shared this before, but I'm like, well, we're in the realm of malchut and we're connecting to the realm of Zer Anpin, which is the upper realm. And Shabbat, we make that connection. I said, are we bringing Zer Anpin, the upper realm, down to malchut, or is malchut going up to Zer Anpin? It's a pretty logical question. And he gave me, perfect answer. He said it's a little bit of both. So, I mean, our linear thinking gets us a little trapped sometimes. The bottom line is there's a unity of energetic flow that happens on Shabbat that's not available to tap into the rest of the week. And the work that we do on Shabbat is to maximize that unity of worlds. Okay, let's try one more. 248. Kema di kadash yoma ishta'a b'ri'ah deruchin delai itberei lon gufa v'chila hava yada kadosh baruch hu la'akava lakacho yoma ad yitberun gufin lahane ruchin ela ilana the da'a tovara idarahu sitra achara dera uva'a litakva be'alma vitparshu kama ruchin bechama zainin litakva be'alma begufin. Ron?
When that day was sanctified, the creation of the bodies for certain spirits was not completed.
Oh, whoa. There was something else to do. Keep going.
So he asks, was not the Holy One, blessed be he, aware of that, so that he could delay the sanctification of that day until the bodies for those spirits were created?
Yeah, why couldn't it have been done differently so the completion would have taken place? Why did we have to go to Shabbat where there was a cessation of certain work, it sounds like? Go ahead.
And he answers, the tree of knowledge of good and evil aroused the evil other side, who wanted to rule over the world. So a lot of spirits were dispersed and went forth with much weaponry to achieve strength and to be beclothed with the bodies of this world.
Okay, so this gets us to this whole idea of the distinction between the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. At first blush, the tree of knowledge of good and evil sounds like a reasonable thing. I'd like to know what's good. I'd like to know what's evil. I want to know what's good and what's bad. I mean, it's kind of what we were taught as kids. Be good, don't be bad. And yet it's in conflict with this tree of life consciousness, with it, which basically is, it's all good. So which is it? So clearly within our realm, there is negativity. But negativity is really just the absence of light. And even with negativity, even in darkness, there is light. So part of what we have to keep in mind as we approach our week, as we approach Shabbat, is that all the challenges that we are met with are there to assist us. It's always, and so to the point we made earlier and the point that Chana was making, it's like, what words do we choose and what perspective do we have? All the things that are happening in our life are there to assist us to move to the next level. And so in this context, we want to still find a way to maintain and connect to the unconditional happiness that remains in here. Your unconditional happiness is within. The externals, they're there. This chaos that we are confronted with, these challenges that we are confronted with, I mean, legitimately, they're going to knock us down. It'd only be natural for them to knock you down and put us in a more negative disposition and more negative thought pattern and spiral downward. It's natural, but again, we're here to overcome that nature. And the more work we do to overcome that nature, the less necessity there is for certain types of chaos to enter our lives. So as we go into Shabbat, let's go in with a consciousness of maximizing the blessings available, maximizing the energy we need in our lives, the energy of fulfillment we need, maximizing the opportunity to remove chaos in the week ahead, and also ultimately raising our consciousness so we can see that everything that happens is for our good, even if we don't see it. Even if it looks bad, let's not even go there. Even if we would say it's objectively bad, it's there to assist us. Even the challenges are there to assist us in elevating. Okay, we're out of time. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Love you all. Have a great week. Thank you.
Shalom. Thanks, everybody.
Shabbat
Thank you.
shalom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Shabbat shalom.